but we're delighted tonight to have the opportunity to show this marvellous film. And as I mentioned in the email, it's a particularly appropriate occasion to do so because exactly 100 years ago tonight, my compatriot Eric Liddell won the 400 metres in the 1924 Paris Olympics, setting the world record as he did so. We'd hoped to have actually one of his relatives here this evening and also a member of the Eric Liddell community from Scotland. Unfortunately, health circumstances have prevented both of them from attending. But it's fantastic to be thinking about Eric Liddell and Harold Abrahams and the amazing stories that we'll see produced here this evening. So first of all, give a very big, warm Stella Cinemas welcome to Lord David Puttnam. And we have no Goliaths here this evening, but we have two Davids instead, which is even better. The former Olympian, double European indoor champion, now RTE Sports presenter, David Gillick. So we saw there a fantastic film just covering some of the stories of the Irish Olympic team. Maybe I can ask you first, David, what Chariots of Fire meant to you when you saw it. I'm guessing if it came out in 1981, you'd have seen it quite a few years after it originally was released. But what did it mean to you and your generation of Irish athletes growing up? Because it seems in many ways it's a quintessentially English or British film and something of its period. And of course, the original Paris Olympics was just a couple of years after Irish independence. So for you as a young athlete, what, in the sort of 90s, 80s, 90s, what did the film mean to you?
Yeah, well, I turned 41 there 2 days ago, so I was 83 when I was born, so it took a couple of years until I was able to visually see it. But I think I can remember watching it, you know, probably, maybe when I was around 10 or so, and it inspired me, it grabbed me because just the whole thing about the Olympic Games, like that was the thing that really kind of caught my attention. And I grew up in a house where sport was at the forefront. My parents participated in sport. I'm the youngest of four, two brothers, a sister and me. Athletics was part of our life. You know, I got into athletics because my brothers and sisters participated in our local area, which is just up the road, Dundrum. And I think watching the movie inspired me, but it was the theme tune that really, really got me. And as a young lad in Dublin, we had the community games. So I can remember going out to Morton Stadium over in Santry with my kind of, I suppose, friends and everyone from my community. And you used to do like a lap of honour before the competition started. So you'd get behind your banner and everyone would walk a lap of the track. And the theme tune was banged out over the PA system. Now it was a bit kind of rockety and windy and brittle, but that's the thing that kind of grabbed me. And yet you kind of reference a quintessential sort of English movie, but I think it was more than that. I think it was that inspirational factor about the Olympic Games and what it can do and what it can mean. And just being a young guy who I didn't know I was going to have a career in athletics, but it was something that just grabbed me at that time. And I spent a lot of time, probably the majority of my career, based out of Loughborough University outside of Leicester in the UK. And, you know, that kind of connection of going over to an environment where a lot of British athletes, you know, trying to surround yourself with better people to improve, and then kind of thinking back to the movie, sure, that's what it was all about, you know, the people around you and pushing and that competitive nature to it.
Can I ask you, David, what inspired you to produce this film, late 70s, I guess? Was it something about the Olympics? Was it the story of the two athletes? Was it a mixture of things that brought you to doing this particular film?
I think, Paul, that anyone that was in my business knows that it's not any one thing. It's actually a combination of things which at a certain point kind of begin to synchronize with each other, and you think, oh, actually there's more to this, there's more. And it was very much that. So if I go right the way back, my father was a photographer with the Associated Press. He was given the job in 1948 of overseeing all the photography at the London Olympics, 48 London Olympics. I was 7 years old, and he took me along with him a couple of times. And, you know, the 40s in Britain were pretty grey and grim, and all of a sudden it was like this extraordinary, colourful event. And I remember it really very vividly. I mean, Fanny Blankers-Koen was this so-called Dutch housewife who won the 100 metres, 200 metres. Emil Zatopek. I mean, these were amazing creatures. And I came away from that, and do you remember there was a guy called Sabutio? Yes. So I had a lot of Sabutio men. this sounds kind of a bit embarrassing, really. So, I created my own Olympic Games as a Subbuteo. Every single event, I found some way of using Subbuteo to jump or do, and I kept record books and everything else. And then also I loved comics. And there was a comic character called Alf Tupper in, I think, the Beano. And Alf Tupper was an orphan, lived with his aunt, and he was a runner. And he used to go out and beat the rich kids and earn some money. And that's how he kept him and his aunt. That's kind of very, very early professionalism. So I was obsessed with Alf Tupper. I'm nearly finished, I promise. Then the 1964 Olympics was the first time the Olympics were on television. And I was watching that, and a woman called Anne Packer won the 800 metres. She'd already got this amazing story. She'd got a silver medal in the 400 metres. She was then persuaded, or she asked, to stay on for an extra few days and run in the 800 metres. And this is the little crossover. And she won it, but she also won it the most exciting races I've ever seen in my life. In the last 200 metres, she literally accelerated right the way around. In fact, the commentator, David Coleman, said, well, Packer's out of it, with 200 metres to go. Yeah, she's out of it. Boom. And then I read that she was a school teacher and that she'd been allowed to stay a couple of extra days as long as she was back at school teaching on the Monday. And to me, that was such an amazing, quintessential amateur in the best possible sense, that this extraordinary woman, a school teacher, goes to Tokyo and wins a gold and a silver medal. If you put all those together, when I read the little story, it was just a little paragraph in a record book, it thought, well, of course, that's it. And all those stories came together. I mean, it's going to sound, I hope I haven't romanticized it, but that's the way I remember it.
And in a way, for my generation growing up in the sort of 80s, the Olympics were marked by the sort of Cold War boycotts. You know, the sort of Western world boycotting the Moscow Olympics, or much of it, the Americans, a lot of people, the Russians, the Soviet, boycotting the Los Angeles Games. But I always associated with the Olympics with that sort of spirit of idealism and amateurism, and it's an interesting feature of the film, isn't it? Because Harold Abrahams is criticised in a way for having a professional coach, and Eric Liddell is almost the epitome of the gifted amateur. But the Olympic ideal is still very powerful today, and we might just have a clip, I think, from David's personal archive. This is Baron Pierre de Coubertin, the founder of the modern Olympics, and saying a few words about what the Olympics meant to him.
That's a film that's been made for the Paris Olympics by the French specifically to celebrate de Coubertin. What's really interesting is the French are trying to use this Olympics, quite rightly, to remind the world that they invented the Olympic Games, or de Coubertin invented the Olympic Games, and that there was an ideal sat behind it, and that ideal is in danger of being lost.
And it's a tradition of the Olympic Games to try and have an Olympic truce every year, but when you look at the horrors going on in Ukraine and your horrors going on in Gaza, you realize that the Olympic ideal is rather absent in many parts of the world. But it's very present in Irish sport, David, and you'll be there with RTE for the Games, and from Rashida Adeleke to the boxers, Kelly Harrington, others. You've got some really great medal prospects. Can you tell us a little bit about your hopes for the Olympics from an Irish point of view?
Yeah, we kind of say this every Olympic year, that this is the best team we have going into the Olympic Games, but I actually think, honestly, this is the best team. And the reason is that when you start kind of looking at the members of that team, it's probably the team where we have the most European and world champions in their own given sport. So when you mention kind of, our hopes, well, I'm conscious of who's in the crowd here, but 6 is our best. We got 6 medals in London, 2012. So they're hoping that we'll better that this year. But you need moments. You need things to happen. So you need a number of key moments to get 6 medals, to get 7, to get 8 medals. So when you look across the whole team, when you look at the likes of Rhys McLennan, the gymnast, you've got our rowers, obviously down in Skib. There's something in the water down there. It's they're just the medal factory. So hopefully, they might get 1 or 2. And then you're looking at the boxers. We've 10 boxers going to the Olympic Games. It's as a small nation, it's one of the biggest boxing teams going to the Olympic Games. You mentioned Rashida Adeleke, who is a phenomenal talent. We haven't had a medal on the track since Sonia back in Sydney. So we're due one, and I might be a little bit biased, but I think if we can get a medal on the track, it might trump every other medal. But it remains to be seen. But I think Rashida is definitely a talent that can do really well. Kieran McGean, you saw in the European Championships in Rome a couple of weeks ago, 4 medals, 2 gold, 2 silver. It's our best ever medal haul. And I think there's a buzz around Irish athletics right now, and it's been coming over the last couple of years. We've what is really great to see is our national championships were on in Morton Stadium there a couple of weeks ago. We had the biggest crowd ever to come out and support our athletes. We also had a big crowd down in Cork City Sports there during the week, and we've done Morton games tomorrow night again, hopefully another crowd. And I think that goodwill and that enthusiasm and that support for our athletes is there, and hopefully we can carry that through. And also just to mention the close kind of link. A lot of our athletes, well, not a lot, but a good few of our athletes are based over in the UK. Sarah Healy, people might know, who again is local to here, ran a fantastic personal best in the Paris Diamond League, and she's based out of Manchester, with Keely Hodgkin, and one of the GB's front runners for a medal. And again, I was someone that spent an awful lot of time in the UK, and I think that close relationship, from a coaching relationship to getting into the groups and bettering ourselves, that's what it's all about. So hopefully the Irish team can go into Paris with high hopes. I think it's our largest team. There's just under 140 athletes going. The rugby sevens is another medal kind of chance in there as well. So I could be here all day kind of going down through the team, but yeah, let's hope it's a good one. I think it will.
David, as a British-born person, now an Irish citizen, does that mean you'll be cheering on both teams? If it was an Irish-British head-to-head in a boxing final, would you be studiously neutral, or would you have one tendency one way or the other?
Be careful now.
I don't have to be, fortunately. Because of the, as it were, the underdog component of all this, I would definitely be cheering the green shirt, without any doubt at all.
Very good, very good. Can we turn back to the making of the movie, David, and ask you a bit about that? And I mean, any reflections you have on the making of the movie, but in particular, I think there's a clip from your archive which I'll ask you to introduce. But it's about the music, which is obviously one of the iconic aspects of an iconic movie, as David touched on. We can all hear that soundtrack in our head. But tell us a little bit about how that came about, or almost didn't come about.
I mean, I don't want to preempt the clip, because it was quite remarkable. I tried to work with Vangelis, who's a fantastic guy, on Midnight Express, and we couldn't make it work. The record companies couldn't agree with each other. And so we'd stayed in touch, and Hugh Hudson, the director, knew him, had done some commercials with him. He's a very nice guy. His father had died. His father was an Olympian. Hugh, I think in the film, says he was an athlete. He actually was a field. I think he was a discus player or a discus or hammer thrower. And he died, and Vangelis was really eager to try and do some sort of an oratorio, a tribute to his father. He was too late. We'd finished the film, and Patsy and I were in a restaurant, and he turned up. I don't know how he found out we were in the restaurant, and said, "Look, come outside." We went outside. He had a Rolls Royce, naturally, rock star. They all have Rolls Royces. And had a cassette. He put the cassette into the thing, and suddenly we heard bum, 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 literally hair in the back of the neck. So he said, "What do you think?" I said, "It's great, but it's too late. The film's finished, Vangelis. I've been telling you for weeks." Oh, God, he was pretty upset. So I said, "I'll tell you what, we're still making the front and end titles. Still working on those. Why don't we try it over the front and end title, see what happens?" And we did. And so the result is the one you're very familiar with. The theme never appears in the rest of the movie. It's not there. It was too late. So the whole of Chariots of Fire has got all sorts of Vangelis themes and stuff, but the theme music you're familiar with is only over the front and end credits. And that's... I love telling a story because people say, "Really?" But it is.
So you could have been your athletics stadium in Dundrum, dancing along or racing along to sort of 1920s Gilbert and Sullivan type music.
I got to be honest, like that definitely wouldn't have made my pre-race playlist, stuck in between Riverdance and the Rocky Team tunes. That wouldn't have made it. So it's actually fascinating how that story came to be, because it's such an iconic part of the movie, but yet it's not really in the movie.
No.
Do you have a favourite scene from the movie? We're just seeing those first opening scenes reminds me of many of the bits that sort of sometimes move me to tears. Do you have a favourite scene, a favourite moment, David?
I think, because I obviously in advance of this, I watched it back, and there's not just one thing that sticks out. I think it goes back to that journey. And I think that's the key thing that really resonated with me. And even though it was shot in a different era and everything that came with it, even from coaching and travel and kind of building up to the big event, it's that journey that really kind of resonates with me because, you know, you referenced that kind of the amateur ethos of it all. And I think, you know, we're still in, like, I suppose the Olympics, athletics is still an amateur sport. Yes, it's changed an awful lot and you can make a living from it, but there still is that hustle in it. There still is that, you know, that proper grind, that perseverance. And those are the kind of the themes that really stuck out at me, you know, just the hard slog to get where you wanted to go and chase that dream. And I think a lot of even our athletes going into Paris now, like that still resonates today. And that's really kind of what stands out to me.
David, we've both been watching on Netflix Sprint.
Yeah.
Did you find it absolutely remarkable looking at the different training techniques of the Jamaicans and the Americans? I mean, the Jamaican it is amateurish, it's wonderful, wonderfully amateur, and yet they're producing these amazing athletes. And then it's got the hyper-professionalism of the Americans who are still struggling to beat them. I mean, that's really came across to me.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating because Sprint has just been released there in the early part of July and it's on Netflix. And basically it's the Formula One version of athletics, and they follow, I think it's 4 athletes, and basically they kind of go in and follow the journey. But you're absolutely right. Like, and I actually trained in the group that Noah Lyles was in. The coach was Lance Brown, and I spent a lot of time down there. And there's like they've glamorized it for obvious reasons in Netflix and things like that, but it's not as glamorous when you're there. There still is that hard graft of just turning up at a 400-meter track and just putting in the solid work. And then obviously you go down to Jamaica and it's probably even less glamorous, you know, because it's just maybe the facilities, the investment, whatever it is. But I think it's great insight into the sport. And I think that's what I say the general public would kind of get. You know, I've had friends come up to me and go, God, I didn't really realise it was like that. But it hasn't changed an awful lot from back in the Chariots of Fire. There still is that hard slog. There still is that determination from the individual, you know, having your coach, having those key people around you, and obviously having that purpose, where you want to go and where you want to get to.
And David, making a film is also a hard slog, and it's about teamwork and it's about people around you and inspiration. And we have a clip here from your late colleague Colin Welland, which I think was a little bit about what the film meant to those of you who were making it.
Yes, I mean, you know, the person I owe a massive debt to is Colin. Colin was a sports journalist, effectively, with The Observer, and he'd done one film prior called Yanks. But what Colin brought to it was extraordinary integrity. And one of the interesting things, Paul, so the film is seen as a sort of very British celebratory thing. It actually isn't the way we wrote it. It's about defiance. You've got to remember, Harold Abrahams refuses to go along with the 2 masters at the college, as you'll see. Liddell refuses the Prince of Wales in terms of running on a Sunday. And that was for us, the core of it, was people having principles to take on, as it were, the what were in those days called their elders and betters. And Colin, when he writes it, Colin's a man from Newton the Willows near Manchester. And Colin was writing not about anti-Semitism. He was writing about what it was like to be a kid from the north trying to break into Fleet Street and being refused. So all those words are him, in a sense, it's his anger. And that was a piece of luck we could never have anticipated. And so Colin's take on the film is a very, very important one to me. He got it. And he got it in a way maybe I had never even imagined it was possible. And the success in many, many, many ways is to his screenplay. He won the Oscar, deserved to win the Oscar. But he was more than that. He was the film's moral force.
That's a fantastic note on which to end. Please join me in thanking David Puttnam and David Gillick.